Welcome to the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast. Whether you are a seasoned professional or a first-time fundraiser, we have the advice you need to take your next step toward major gift mastery. I'm your host, Tom Dauber, President of Abundant Vision Philanthropic Consulting. So I was meeting with a nonprofit leader this weekend, and we were just having a brief discussion. He'd been listening to some of my podcasts. Ryan, I know you're out there, so shout out to you. You've inspired this particular one. He was talking with me about donors, different types of donors. In his experience, they really prefer to give to things in the community. And he was struggling to understand why they might give to other causes or in different ways. It's a great question. And it's something that I run into a lot. And truthfully, I've had my own assumptions about that over the years. And it's true. Some donors do prefer to give in particular ways. There are donors that only want to give to their local community for various reasons. I think of a CEO I approached once of a pharmaceutical company, and this person was from India, and they only gave to charitable causes in India, and they had good rationale for it. The dollar can do a lot more in India than it can in the United States. The purchasing power is just better. So, there was no criticism on my part for her rationale. It made sense to me. Probably do the same thing if I had those concerns, right? So, but the only way that you can understand the various types of donors that you're engaging with and to kind of tease out what their interests are, why they give, how they like to give, all those things is really by asking them. And I know that might sound kind of obvious, but it's totally true. It's so important in fundraising that we never make assumptions for our donors. We don't want to assume, for example, that they want their name on a building or that other types of recognition are or aren't important to them. You're going to run into some donors who really value thank you notes. You're going to have other donors who are going to tell you, hey, just don't waste your time on that. Give me a call. Let me know how my giving's making a difference, but don't waste postage, because they're frugal and that's their business. I still might send them a thank you note every once in a while, but you just got to be thoughtful. And the name of the game for fundraising success really is trying to customize the donor experience in a way that makes them feel known and appreciated, and as if they were really shrewd in investing in the work that you're doing. So when we look at the different types of things that a donor could be into, some of them could be international sorts of efforts. Some of them could be into global types of efforts. If we think about even just our nation today, there were probably a lot of people energized around the recent election and giving to national causes that supported their candidate of choice. And even today, I know a lot of folks are passionate about the war in Ukraine and are giving generously to nonprofits trying to provide relief there. Right. So we can all think about those sorts of efforts and how they're being funded by people. And there's also occasional giving. I'll never forget, 9/11, back there in 2001, I rushed out looking for some place to give blood to, not knowing that blood donations weren't needed or helpful because frankly, there just weren't that many survivors to need the blood. But I'll never forget driving 20 minutes to the place that Normally, there are blood drives for outside of my community, and um, there was nothing going on there. And but I was so frustrated and so really devastated by what had happened. I had spent time at the Twin Towers in my youth, and had positive memories there, and lived in New York City for a few summers. And I was so moved, I felt like I needed to do something. And you're going to find that today. You're going to hear about hurricanes and people being moved to support those types of efforts. Um, and there's great organizations like Convoy of Hope and the Red Cross, and many, many others that are really focused as disasters happen to get out there and go. And you're going to find those people that care a lot about those things, especially if it's a location like for me that meant a lot to them. And then, of course, as my friend Ryan was thinking about, local stuff, people certainly care about what's going on in their backyard, what's happening to the youth in their community, all those sorts of things. Um, so how do you know? How do you know what somebody wants? Well, when you approach them, the number one rule in fundraising is be transparent. And again, we're not making assumptions here. So I would just say to them, "Hey, I know you've given a lot to this cause over here locally. You've made a big impact. As someone who thinks about philanthropy, as someone who has found joy in helping others, I'm really curious. What do you think about this cause, and and what about it is attractive or not attractive to you? Because I'm committed to it. I want to see this issue addressed. Um, but I know that not everybody's going to want to be a part of this effort. What do you recommend? How should I be thinking about this work presently?" So once you've asked that question, I would I would just be quiet. I would let them talk and hear what they have to say. Um, it's important in that effort, though, is that you want to ask really clear questions. Part of not making assumptions is calling out the question, or calling out the elephants in the room. What I mean is, if there's something that you're thinking is going to impact them, that's going to impact the way they might respond to your solicitation or your invitation to be a part of such an effort, call it out. You might say something like, you know, you've given a lot of money to this other thing over here. And I know in a lot of situations, after someone makes a really big gift, a lot of times they might be tapped out for a season. It's probably not the right time for them to make a gift. Is that your experience? Because you might find that it's not. You might find that they're looking for the next thing to support. In coming to it from that perspective, what you're showing to your donor is that you have a desire to empathize with them and their situation, that you're being thoughtful about the experiences they're having, and and even that you're sensitive and reasonable, and not making assumptions that they're going to want to be a part of what you're doing. And I'll tell you, people find transparency and clarity and honesty very winsome. It's a great way to really connect with donors by just telling them the truth and laying it out there in a way that's non-assuming. That's the approach that you want to take. Now, the other line of questioning, and I think I've talked about this before on other podcasts, but you really want to take that opportunity while you have them there to learn about their deepest passions. That is, ask them what they like to give to and why. Oftentimes, people will tell you about the other nonprofits that they like to support. And learning those motives it can be really, really important. Understanding that someone has a deep value for taking care of animals or supporting an organization that was there for them or their kids or their grandparents or what have you. That's really helpful to know because sometimes when you learn something like that, you can actually show them how there is a bridge between the values that they have, the concerns that they have, or the giving motivations that they have, and the work that you're trying to do that they may not have seen otherwise. And that also gives you an opportunity too to ask them very honestly how they feel about your organization and the work you're doing. Do they know much about it? Maybe they've only heard about the organization from afar, but haven't fully understood all that you're doing or why you do it and the impact that you're making. It's a great opportunity. Now, you might learn that they dislike you, not you personally, but your organization, and that's actually helpful too, because we always want to be humble and we always want to take a curious approach and learn about where we may have made missteps, where our organization, may even owe somebody an apology. Maybe your organization dropped the ball in some way. Maybe you didn't say thank you when you needed to, and that isn't to say that there wasn't a good reason for it. What I mean is, I've seen times where major gift officers have transitioned out, and there's been a gap in the role for a while. And thank you letters haven't been sent. People haven't been engaged properly. There's good reason for that. That's nobody's fault necessarily. If an organization is understaffed and is missing a person, well, it stands to reason that they they're going to drop the ball. I mean, that's just what happens when people leave. But once you know that there's been an offense there somehow, well, then you can address it. And then you can try to make things right. And you can show to the donor, hey, we're not perfect. We make mistakes, but we hear you. And we want to be responsive to that. So again, learning how they feel about your organization and the impact that you're making, that's so important because you might find you have a great ally and advocate that you never knew about. And maybe one that it was just a matter of time uh, till they gave to you. Somebody needed to broach the topic. Tom Dauber here for Abundant Vision Philanthropic Consulting. Fundraising can be hard work, and it can be hard to mentally get into the place you need to be in order to see new opportunities. Everyone struggles with it. We are like the fish in the fishbowl who just can't see the water they're swimming in. That's when having outside expertise comes in handy. For 25 years, I've been helping nonprofits analyze their challenges, discover new ways forward, and develop clear plans that lead to greater fundraising revenues. Now I am available to help your organization develop the abundant vision it needs to inspire new levels of philanthropy at your nonprofit as well. Check out abundantvision.net to start your journey toward greater fundraising success today. Now, back to the show. As you have someone that you're talking to about this sort of thing, you can kind of even conduct a mini feasibility study with them. And that is to say, you want to be prepared with some hypothetical questions for their response and consideration. This is really important, especially if you're at a university or some other place where there's a complicated multi-step process of getting things approved. That is to say, at many like universities, you've got to have a board of trustees agree to like a building project, a big building project. But at the same time, those boards of trustees aren't going to want to approve a building project, if they don't know that that money's coming in. And so what comes first there, the chicken or the egg, right? People don't want to give to a project that hasn't been approved by the board, but the board doesn't want to approve anything that hasn't been funded by a donor. So what do you do? Well, this is the land of hypothetical questions. And so you just say this, if there was a way that we could provide our students a better facility, if there was a way we could help solve issue X, whatever the thing is, if there was a way we could do this, would that matter to you? Would you want to be involved in some way? And at that point in the conversation, you should have some plan. Maybe the thing is, well, we really feel like we need to build a new lab or a new classroom or a new outreach center. Whatever the thing is, you should have some sense for what that would cost, how much that would be, even before you have permission from your board to move forward with it. But to just know. And that would be the point again where you listen. When you ask, would that matter to you? You want to know, well, why would that matter to you? How much does that matter to you? Why is that important in this situation, in this time, in this community, or in this context, right? And to the question, would you want to be involved? You also want to ask things like, well, how would you want to be involved? Could you see yourself giving to that type of thing? Could you see yourself volunteering on a fundraising board or a campaign committee? Could you see yourself hosting an event in your home to encourage other people? Could you be an advocate for this project? Broaching those questions from a place of the hypothetical scenario is fine, because then what that does, but it's crucial that you communicate clearly. We don't know if this is going to happen, because unless we get the support to get the approval of the board, it's not happening. Because what you don't want to do is get their hopes up that you're going to do it for sure, right? You want to be very clear. This is very tentative. We don't know if this is going to happen. Because what that also does is it creates a sense of urgency. Donors tend to be motivated, certainly by the emotion and the passion of a thing, but they also tend to be motivated by a particular sense of urgency that their gift, if made in a timely way, could make a real impact in this moment. One time I closed a $500,000 gift because it came down to my organization who was competing with another organization, right? For a particular person. We were both trying to recruit the same person, and we needed to have particular facilities for that person. And it was going to cost us at least $500,000. And I was able to say to a donor, hey, if we can get this commitment from you, this is going to let us beat out that other organization and make sure we bring the best people to our organization, right? But it was very time bound. It was very time sensitive, and they were all about it. Now, I talked to 2 other people and they turned me down, right? But they totally got it. They were not upset that I was asking them on the spur of a moment for a very large gift, because these were all people we knew well. We knew they were in their corner, and we knew they would want to know because of how important this recruitment was for the organization. And so we led with that, right? Like, well, we know that this isn't the ideal time. But if you could invest at this time, you could help us do something remarkable to move the organization forward. But either way, it was all tentative. If we can get this, then we can do that, right? But then that lets you go back to your board to say, hey, I've talked with 10 people, and 5 of them have all said, if we were doing this, I would be willing to do that, right? And that can be really meaningful. I mean, there's folks, in feasibility studies, when you hire a consultant like me to come in and talk with your donors about these things, Um, you know that that's the sort of thing that helps an organization know if they really can move forward. But it's all going to be hypothetical, and you can have those hypothetical conversations with your donors but you just got to be clear, that it's not a for sure thing. Again, back to that idea of even just calling out the question very clearly. Are you the sort of person that we should be thinking about as a potential donor? And it's okay if you're not. Got to always put that out there. This isn't a place for judgment, right? This is a place for clarity and honesty and transparency. Are you someone we should be thinking about as a potential donor? Or are your philanthropic dollars fully committed at this point? Is this just not the right time? That's totally okay. We're just asking questions here, and there's never a bad question. You know, you could you could even go as far as to ask them for advice about how would they approach funding such an effort, and who might they be talking to if they were you, right? Because you could learn some things. Now, you might get some advice that's no good. So you never want to promise them that you're going to do what they say. Sometimes you're going to talk to people that aren't philanthropic, don't know much about giving or how things really work, and so they may just tell you, "Well, you need to ask 100,000 people for $1. That's really what you need to do. Is just get 1 million people to give you $5 a piece, and then you'll have all the money that you need, for your $5 million project." Well, it doesn't work like that. But I've had nonprofit leaders, frankly, that I thought should have known better, actually come to me and say, "Tom, hey, I was watching this thing that Bernie Sanders was doing, and he's raising all this money, and couldn't we just get our 8,000 alumni to each give us $5? I mean, couldn't we just do that?" And yeah, that was a non-starter. So so again, you're going to get advice, you're going to get input that's no good, but by just soliciting that advice, you're going to begin to engage them. You're going to be able to really see what they think and how they feel about the effort. And in some cases, you might get referrals to talk to people who also care about that sort of thing, or they may begin to open their network to you, which can be valuable to you as a fundraiser. So here's the take home. Never make an assumption that donors only like this or only like that. Heck, I had somebody not too long ago tell me donors don't like facial hair. If you want to be a fundraiser, you can't have a beard. Well, I had a beard for a decade and did just fine, as as did our senior vice president at the time, right? In fact, at most universities right now, since beards are in style, most of the men, many of them have beards because that's just the end thing these days. But somebody heard that once and made an assumption that that was just true, right? You can't make assumptions about donors. They're all going to have different different beliefs, different worldviews, different assumptions about life that they're operating from, and it never pays to assume anything about a donor, right? I mean, you think about it. We've got like 1.6 million nonprofits in our country doing all sorts of work, and most of them are dependent upon donor dollars, right? So if any one particular set of assumptions was true, that like donors only give to their communities, or donors only give to bricks and mortar, or donors only like to give to endowment, or donors never like to give to endowment. Well, none of these places only one type of these places would exist. There would either be lots of places with endowments or lots of places without endowments. There would be lots of bricks and mortar projects or no bricks and mortar projects, right? But that's not what we see when we look across the country. We see lots of different organizations working locally, nationally, globally, funding all sorts of different things, from efforts to, serve the poor, drill water wells, um, create endowed chairs, fund drug research, whatever it is, reaching kids in small communities, all those sorts of things are out there, and that money's coming from donors. So someone cares, someone believes. It's not going to be every donor every time, but there's as many different donors and as many different interests of those donors as there are causes. That's the only thing I think we can really be sure of as we take this approach. So, lastly, rather than making limiting assumptions, you need to engage your donors and ask them yourself, because ultimately you're the person as the staff person or the leader at that organization that the donor wants to connect with. You're the one that has the credibility. You're the one that is the spokesperson for your organization. So get out there, get on the phones, call people, and begin to have hypothetical conversations about how you could work together to change the world. And one last thing, a fella out there who's a great fundraising consultant, Jim Langley, I've had him on the show before. He shared something that's relevant to this conversation. He said, elicit before you solicit. And that's kind of the heart of what I was getting at today, right? You want to connect with them in a way that elicits their emotion and their interest, right? That provokes their deepest concerns. Because once you've had a conversation and you can begin to see those things come out of them, what do they get riled up about? What do they get impassioned about? Then you know how to go in any given conversation. And it may be, hey, it's not us. Talk to our colleagues down the street because they're doing the thing you care about, right? But ultimately, if you're wondering, how do I figure out what people want to give to? You got to have conversations that elicit their passions and interests so that you know how to solicit. So elicit before you solicit. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that nugget there. Now, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast provider. I'm your host, Tom Dauber. Thank you for joining me as we journey together towards major gift mastery on the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast.